encoder, which doesn't seem to actually work on whatever these things are, macOS. So here's what we're doing today. We're going to refactor the useAuth library to start to use XState, because I think that's going to make it easier to add other authentication providers than Auth0 in the future. It's going to clean up the code base, and if we get just lucky enough, we're going to be able to avoid having a context provider, because David keeps promising that XState is like using use reducer with context without having to use context, which is going to make the library easier for people to use. So I started with creating an XState branch, and the next thing I'm going to do is yarn add XState, just so we actually have XState. And then I'm going to open the XState docs, because it's been a while since I used this library, so I think I forgot how it works. Right, so xstatejs.org, we're going to go to docs, and let's see what's going on. Core finite state machines, right, perfect. XState plus React template. I don't want to use a template. Oh, actually we can steal from the template. So we're gonna run tests first. Npm run test. See it, because I know I have some tests for the use reducer at least. So I'm gonna open the useAuth spec, auth reducer spec, and the auth reducer is what we're going to be changing to using XState, which means that these tests should not have to know that we're now using XState in theory. Okay, code sandbox doesn't really work when I'm doing stuff, so we're gonna go here. All right, tests are passing. They're slow, but they're passing. So now if we go into the auth reducer should become an XState kind of thing. So here where we have the auth reducer, instead of that, we're going to create a state machine and go from there. Cool. So let's see. I'm going to, come on, import create machine and interpret from XState. Should we look at a tutorial or guides? Events, transitions, hierarchical context. What is context? Well, finite states are well defined. No, we don't need context right now. What we do need is a state machine. Is there a recipe? Recipes look useful. Usage with React. Perfect. That's exactly what I need. So we're going to import a machine from XState. So import machine from XState, and this is going to export a new XState machine. So we're going to export const an auth machine, which is going to be a new machine that does what? We're gonna have to define some states, and we're gonna have to define transitions between those states. Cool. God damn it, that was loud. Okay. Also, if you show up, say hi in the chat room so I know you're there. We're gonna say this is the I'm going to call it the useAuth thing. Initial is going to be, what is the initial state we want to be in? We're going to start in, let's just say the initial state is logged out, stop authenticating. Oh, because these states don't actually have names. Duh. So we're going to say the initial state is start. And then let's go. So we're going to need a state for being authenticated, a state for being unauthenticated, and we're going to need to have a state for an error, for when there's an error. So yeah, authenticated, unauthenticated, and error states. And then that should be everything we need, right? States. So we're going to start in the unauthenticated state. Unauthenticated state we're going to deal with states later, and we say then you have the authenticated state and you have the error state, right? Those are the three states that you can be in when you're logging into a site or there's an error or whatever. So the unauthenticated state, when we say, you can also be in the authenticating state, the authenticating. So the authenticating state, then we go on start authenticating. Let's call the event start because everything is authentication, so we don't want to duplicate too much. On start, we go into the authenticating state, and then the authenticating state can be in, let's see, is authenticating. What does is authenticating do? It can either log you out or yeah. So on error, we're gonna go into the error state, and on authenticated, yes, authenticated, you're going to go into the authenticated state. Then when you are authenticated, you're going to have, you'll be able to go log out, which will move you into the unauthenticated state. You're gonna be able to go, yeah, so when you're authenticated, you can log out and that moves you out, right? Log out goes blah, and then, let's call this login. That makes more sense. Login, authenticated, error, authenticated, and then the error state is that the final state? I think that's the final state. Or rather, it's a final state. So we've got that. Now the auth machine gonna need to do what? Let's see. The auth machine is gonna have to deal with, I think we're gonna need to define some state for this stuff. Set state current toggle machine, initial state, blah. Cool. So that's the, I think that's the full authentication flow. We're gonna test it later and we'll see. So we've got that. Now we need to see what this does. Let's go into the useAuth function. So the auth reducer spec, describe login, adds user to local storage, sets user, sets expires at, and sets result. Cool. And that happens when we push in an action. Okay, maybe we can start with the actual tests. Let's start changing the tests. So we're going to get the auth machine instead of the auth reducer from auth reducer. And then the auth machine is starting in this state. How do I give the, so the machine is gonna need to have some context, and it's going to use the contexts to have state or states. Yes, states, state nodes, state definitions, state metadata. State metadata after failure, meta message loading. Okay, so what do we do with the context? That seems useful. Finite states are well defined. Infinite state machines and state charts. State that represents quantitative data that can be potentially infinite is represented as extended state. In XState, extended state is known as context. Below is an example. Right, so that's what we're gonna need. So for context, where are we? Auth reducer, we're gonna add a context here, and the context is going to have what? Context, oh no, we look at the auth reducer. So the state actually has a user expires at, the auth result, and the is authenticating. We don't need the is authenticating anymore because we can get that from the actual state of the state machine. So we need, right? Is that what we need? User expires at, and yeah. So the context is going to have a user. It's going to have a expires at timestamp, which is going to be null. And we're gonna have is authenticating set to true? No. Oh, the auth result is also something we need. Auth reducer, state action, expect blah. Those are side effects. And then cool. Okay. So the user, where am I? No, not use auth. We're in the auth reducer. User expires that, and we said that we have the auth result. Auth result, which also starts as null. So that's our context. Now we need to define side effects, or rather transient transition. Initial context, that's the initial context, allowed to increment, blah. So how do I set context? Values provided from function arguments, some context, with context assign action, actions assign. Okay. So the assign action is used to update the machine's context. It takes the context assigner, which represents how values in the current context should be assigned. So we increment the current value message. Okay. So let's see. Where do I put this? Where do I put the assign action? Inc twice. On inc twice actions. On login, we have action. Is it action or is it actions? Actions. Assign, which comes from, we're going to auto import that from XState. And then the assign action is going to get a new context and an event. Oh, so it gets the old context and an event. What? Event is deprecated. Cool. So how do we get assign meta, an object with metadata? Aha. So how do I do this? State is the meta object contains both the property assigner and the context assigner function signatures above are given 3 arguments: context, event, and meta. So how do I use meta? Action order, nodes, TypeScript, counter context, okay. Increment, aha. No, wait, I'm getting confused. So count context count plus 1, yes, that's an increment. What do I do if I need to get arguments for this shit? Count user context provided from argument. Your implementation may vary. What? Assign to context. Context event. Yeah, but it's saying event is deprecated. So I don't want to use the event right now, which makes this really way harder to use than it needs to be. Event and meta. Wait, let's look at what assign does. Action types assign, XState assign. Okay, so where do I get this? Nope, that's not useful. Assign, assignment static, assignment property, assignment context. Count context blah. Yeah, because the problem is that I need to get the actual, what's it called? I need to get the value for what the user is going to be and stuff like that. So that's confusing here. But I guess we can try with context and never mutate the machine's context externally. Prefer the object syntax of assign. This makes it possible for future analysis tools to predict how certain properties can change. Aha. So let's try that. So when we are logging in, we can do this. User gets a context, right? Let's see. So assign, const assign, this expression is not callable. So where do I get the assign from? Is there an example of this? I would love a code sandbox or something that tells me how to do this. Aha, we get assign from XState, assign, and then we do turn always on fill target. Okay, so context assign gets for the, let's see, on, what did we say? On login goes to authenticating, and actually that does not have an action, but we do have on error. How do I make gets, there we go. So that's what we're gonna do. On when we go to authenticated, we have the target filling and actions of, so these actions are gonna be what? This is quite confusing. So the action is that user becomes context event meta. Aha, machine auth result, no. Are there any, does anyone know if there's any new examples of this stuff? Let's see. Assign action, the context, the event. Okay, great. But it says event is deprecated. Whatever. So we're gonna ignore that. The event then gets, we return event.user, I think, right? So let's try that. On user expires at auth result, any, wait, what? Sign action. Yeah, I'm sorry that this is not working as well as I thought it would. I'm just very confused by how to use this stuff. And the documentation is not extremely helpful. It's a little bit helpful, but it's not extremely helpful. So assign context event, increment the current count. Context event, context count plus. Okay, so we say we want just the event user, but then how do I push the event in? Guess we'll figure that out later. And we're going to say that expires at also gets context and event and becomes event.expires at, and we're also gonna need the auth result. Auth result, context event.auth result. Cool. Now, what is this shit complaining about? Let's see TypeScript. So we have the counter context. So we need to say, let's add interface. Oh, actually, we should have an interface for auth state. Why didn't I think of that before? So auth state is a type which we can use. So we need to have is authenticating, error type, and error. So is authenticating, which starts as false, error, which is a that, error, which starts as null, I guess, null, and error type, which starts also as null. And we say that this whole thing is auth state, uses the type of auth state, and then suddenly everything gets nice and colored. Awesome. So why is everything colored now? Property, the unique ID of the state node, which can be referenced as a transition target via, okay, yes. No overload matches this call. Sweet. So let's see, what are you complaining about? Authenticated. Do I have to change these to undefined? I do. So it looks like TypeScript prefers undefined versus null when you have a question mark on a property. Don't know why that's the case, but it does. So we need to have undefined. And then we say when you are authenticating, on authenticating, we want to, how do I set side effects? Effects. Invoked actions, single discrete effects, activities, continuous effects. All of the action creators documented here return action object. It's a pure function that only returns an action and does not imperatively send an event. Okay, whatever. Actions activate blah. On trigger target active, no. Actions, action implementations activate. When should I use transition versus entry exit action? An entry exit action means execute this action on any transition that enters exits this state. Right? Aha. Okay. So we're gonna then have some actions defined here. And we're going to say that we have an action called let's see, what is this action going to be called? It's gonna be called context event. Oh, okay, I get it. So we're gonna have an action that that says we are now going into authenticating, and that's going to set the is authenticating to true, and then the exit action is going to set it to false, which makes sense, right? Yes. Yeah. So we have the, let's call it set authenticating action. Let's call it start authenticating action, which is going to be basically the same thing we have down here, and is going to get the context. So it's going to be the assign action, assign, and we say context becomes assign of is authenticating becomes true. And then we have stop authenticating, which is assign is authenticating as false. Right? Come on. What am I clicking? What is this complaining about? No overload matches this call. Config blah. Object literal may only specify known properties and actions does not exist in type. Okay, so where do we put actions? We put it as just like this. That's weird. No, come on. So, aha. That's weird. Oh, okay, I get it. So we're first we define all of the states. Those are these ones. And then afterwards we define the possible actions. Cool. No. TypeScript makes this really annoying. What are you complaining about? No overload matches this call. So we have the type assign action is not assignable to type action object auth state of any blah. Why? What does assign do here? Context, the current machine context, action meta, type execs, ascend blah. Okay. Wow. Maybe I should do like a course on XState because this is really confusing. How do I do an assign action here? Assign. Entry assign some actor blah. That's the only example here. That's fun. Okay, let's see, what do we get up here? Declarative actions, type activate exec. Let's see. Actions, come on, where are you? Actions. There we go. Actions, and then activate context event. Do I have to return a context? Does anyone know? Context, and we say context. No, let's do it. Context dot is authenticating equals true. That seems to work. I don't know why that works though. That's the problem. Context dot is authenticating equals false. Okay, so that's doing stuff, but I don't know if actions are supposed to return. Are they supposed to return? Are they supposed to return the context, or are they supposed to just do the context? Delayed events, final states, actors, identifying state nodes, interpreting machines. No. Let's see. Tutorials. No. Recipes. Packages. Patterns. Let's try looking at this recipe for usage with React. Maybe this one has some useful actions. No, it doesn't. Actions are guides. Machine states, events, transitions, actions. Let's see if a guide is useful. Escalate action, choose action, forward to action. Oh no, we were already looking at guides. Maybe I should actually read this stuff, but I'm lazy. Actions are fire and forget side effects. For a machine to be useful in a real world application, yes, I know it needs to have side effects. These are represented in blah. Context, declarative actions. The state instance returned from machine transition has an actions. Okay. Action order, send action. The send event action creates a special send action object that tells a service to send an event to itself. We don't need that, I think. Send targets, raise action. Respond action. The respond action creates, okay, whatever. Forward to action, escalate action, log action. Okay. Pure action. The pure action creator is a pure function that returns the action objects to be executed based on the current state. No, we don't need that part either. Self transition. Okay. SC. Okay. I mean, I guess the best way to try this is to just try it and see what happens. So we have this. When we get into on entry, we say start authenticating. And on exit, we say, is it entry? Oh, actions are executed upon entering a state. Ah, no, that's what I'm missing. I'm missing a comma. Stop authenticating. Cool. Now let's go into the auth reducer spec. Here, I'm going to keep importing the auth reducer so that it's easier to see what's going on. And then auth machine, do we have the stop authenticating? Great. We do have that. So let's try running just this part. Is that something I can actually do? Let's try running npm run test to see that we're running only tests for the start authenticating, and then we can try if moving in that direction actually works, or if the state gets changed properly. So this just keeps running. Source test. Okay, we got 2 passed out of 2 total. That's great. Now let's see. The auth action, start authenticating, changes is authenticating to true. So we're going to try this with a state machine. We're gonna say const, let's go with const machine equals the auth machine. Let's call it state. Const state is the auth machine. We can ignore all of this stuff and say, how do we actually transition between states? Is there a send? Send promise.service. Great. So we're gonna do state.send. We're gonna state.send, and we say we are sending what? Auth reducer. Here we go. We start in unauthenticated and we say login. No, come on. Auth reducer spec. We send login, and then we expect const machine state send. Property send does not exist on blah. Oh, we need to actually instantiate it, don't we? Const promise machine equals machine. Promise service equals interpret on transition. So what we want to do here is create the auth machine and then export const authentication state, or let's call it auth state. Auth state equals interpret the auth machine, right? Yes. What are you squiggly lining about? Yeah, okay. So we're doing that. Then we get the state from the auth machine, and we're now going to let's see what we get. How do we access the context? Context. How do I access context? Context const next state context. So we should say state dot context with dot is authenticating to be true, right? No, come on. Okay, let's see if that worked. Did that work? Also, doesn't seem like I have a lot of people watching today. I mean, I guess what I'm doing is pretty weird. And I'm also lost a lot. So let's see. Is this running? Is this going to work? And I don't know why it takes 13 seconds either. It's just very slow. Come on. Oh, auth machine failed. Oh, okay. Yes. Because we're saying this is auth. Come on. Auth state. And we import it as auth state. Come on. Okay, now let's try that again. npm run test. What is it complaining about now? State.context does not exist. Why does state.context not exist? Very strange. Ba-ba-dum. Yes, use auth on line 64 is failing. Is that line 64 even? Oh, no, what? State context. Is that line 125 then? There we go. So how do I get context out of a state machine? That would be nice to know. Or out of an interpreted state machine. Machine, yes, that's context. Set dynamic initial context, fine. Set custom initial, assign to context, assignment property, assignment context, assignment multiple. How do I get the context? State dot. Come on, dot, show me what I got. Auth reducer. What does interpret return then? Interpret gives me a interpret is a function where, come on, partial interpreter option t-state schema. What? Okay, this type string definition is not, or TypeScript definition is not helping at all. It's super confusing. Interpreter options creates a new interpreter instance for the given machine. So how do I get the context out of a machine? Okay. Patterns sequence. That's not useful. Examples, counter to do MVC. Let's see if the counter shows me how to get a context, because I think, yeah, that's using context for counting. So the count is stored in the context. How do I get the count? State.context.count, interpret on transition state. Okay, that's on transition, but how do I get it later? Is not max context. Counter service send, no transition taken. David, why did you make this so complicated? To do MVC. No, COVID tracker, oh, that's cool. All right, come on. Surely there's some context here. Machine provider, create context. No, that's different. Create machine, COVID machine. Does it have any context? It does not have. COVID data machine. Okay, so how do you test that you got that the context went into the right state? Let's try console. Oh, but console log doesn't work in tests. Nice. Let's try adding a debugger and attaching to this stuff. Inspect break. I think that'll work. Nope. Unrecognized option. Just inspect node. Okay, how do I inspect what jest is doing? How to debug jest tests. Okay, that seems useful. Okay. Node inspect. What if we just run with minus inspect? Nope. Okay. So what is my package JSON doing? We do node minus inspect jest. Will that work? No, of course not. Node modules dot bin jest. Okay. Inspect minus break. So that's gonna give me a node inspector here, Brave inspect, and I can check how this is working. I go into inspect, and it should now break on the debugger statement, which I think I added. Auth reducer, no, where are you? Use auth spec, auth reducer spec, debugger, and it doesn't actually work. Great. That's useful. Come on. Console log state. Does that work? Let's try running jest. No, node run test. Will that work? Module not found. What? Oh, npm run test. Npm run test. Why aren't you working? Right, because this is not console logging anything. What if we say console.error? Console.error. Come on, I just want to see what the state is so I can check the context and see that this is working at all. But no. No. Yes, property context does not exist. How the fuck do I access the context? And why doesn't console logging this shit work? How to console log from jest tests? How to test console? How to get console log does not output when running tests. Perfect. Why does it? Why doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Okay. Mm. Uh-huh. What? Oh, interesting. So what I need to do is add verbose equals true, and then console log will work. What? Okay, I am very confused right now. What if we say we want to run only this one? It's not only npm run test. Let's do auth reducer dot test. Okay, yarn test auth reducer dot test. Let's see if that gives me a verbose output. No tests found. Oh, because it's auth reducer dot spec. Does that make it better? Okay, so now it's actually running. This is a very confusing experience. How do I access the current context? Why is this so hard? Current context is referenced on the state. XState.context. Yeah, but I don't want to run a transition. I want to just run the thing. Why? Uh-huh. Hmm. Uh-huh. Okay. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, that all makes sense, but how do I get access to the context? Why? Hmm. So what does exist on the interpreter? Um, oh, maybe I have to run start. Will that help? Let's try that. Const state equals start. Let's see if running start makes a difference. Otherwise, I'm out of ideas and I'm gonna go pitch on Twitter to see if anyone can help. Nope. Okay, so on that terrible disappointment, I'm going to end this for today and we're going to continue on Sunday. So thanks anyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this at least 2 times as much as I did. And I'll see you all on Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific. Enjoy the rest of the presidential debates.